In the heart of Phnom Penh stands the S-21 Genocide Museum. Once a high school, later transformed into a brutal prison by the Khmer Rouge. Thousands were interrogated, tortured, and never left alive. Today it serves as a haunting reminder of Cambodia's darkest history, ensuring the voices of its victims are never forgotten. Amid the stark decaying walls of S-21, 14 graves lie in quiet mourning. These are the final victims, found when the prison was liberated in 1979, their bodies left behind in the cells where they took their last breath. They are the last trace of the thousands who entered but never escaped. Their graves stand as a solemn testament to the horrors of this place, a haunting reminder of lives lost to cruelty and injustice. Building A, its walls lined with iron beds, rusted chains and dark stains, was the execution chamber of S-21. This is where high-ranking officials, intellectuals and suspected enemies of the Khmer Rouge were brought for brutal interrogation and torture. The rooms remain almost untouched, the haunting photographs on the walls showing the final moments of those who perished here. Even today the silence inside is heavy, as if the past still lingers in the air. No one was safe from S-21. The Khmer Rouge brought in former officials, intellectuals, teachers, doctors, monks, anyone suspected of betrayal. Even their own soldiers and loyal cadres accused of imaginary crimes were imprisoned here. Entire families, men, women and children were taken, because in Pol Pot's regime, even a baby could be seen as an enemy. Once inside, there was no escape. Confessions were forced through torture, and death was the only way out. S-21 was once a school, a place of learning, but under the Khmer Rouge, the classrooms became a chamber of suffering. The blackboards were replaced with chains, the desks removed to make space for torture devices. Pull-up bars in the schoolyard were once used for exercise, were turned into gallows. Prisoners were hung upside down, their heads submerged in human waste until they lost consciousness. Even the old-school benches were used for restraints, where victims were beaten and electrocuted. Every corner of the former school was turned into an instrument of pain, a cruel distortion of a place meant for education. Building B stands as a chilling reminder of S-21's brutal purpose. Here, narrow brick cells were hastily built inside former classrooms, turning them into cramped, suffocating prison blocks. Prisoners were shackled to the floor, unable to move, forced to sit in silence, waiting for the inevitable. The walls covered with haunting black and white photographs, each face a victim who never left. Even today, the bloodstains remain, silent witnesses to the suffering that once filled these halls. Pol Pot, the leader of the Khmer Rouge, was the architect of Cambodia's darkest chapter. Obsessed with creating a classless agrarian society, he emptied cities, abolished money and sent millions to forced labour camps. Anyone seen as an intellectual, teachers, doctors, even people who wore glasses, was labelled an enemy. Under his rule, nearly 2 million people died of starvation, execution and torture. Yet for years after his fall, he lived freely in the jungle, unpunished for his crimes. He died in 1998, taking many of his secrets with him. Dutch, the commander of S-21, was the man who oversaw its horrors, a former teacher turned executioner. He was meticulous, keeping detailed records of every prisoner, every forced confession, every death. Under his command, at least 14,000 people were tortured and killed, yet he saw himself not as a monster, but as a man simply following orders. Decades later, he became the first Khmer Rouge official to face trial, finally sentenced to life in prison, but no punishment could match the suffering he inflicted. At S-21, prisoners lost everything, even their names. Upon arrival, each person was photographed and assigned a number pinned to their chest. They were no longer human, just a record in a death machine. The Khmer Rouge wanted no identities, no pasts, only confessions extracted through torture. Those who entered knew the truths. Once you had a number, you would never leave alive. Today their faces remain on display, haunted reminders of lives reduced to nothing but digits before they were erased forever. At S-21, numbers replaced names to strip prisoners of their identity. Khmer Rouge saw them not as people but as enemies of the revolution, destined to confess and die. Each number was recorded, catalogued and photographed, a final entry in the prison's meticulous records. The system was cold and calculated and efficient. It ensured that every victim was accounted for, not as a person, but as a statistic in the regime's campaign of terror. Among S-21's foreign victims was Kerry Hamill, a young New Zealander who was captured after his yacht drifted into Cambodian waters in 1978. Accused of being a CIA spy, he was tortured for months, forced into writing a false confession before being executed. His family never got to say goodbye. Decades later, his brother Rob Hamill confronted Dutch in court, demanding justice for the life stolen too soon. But like so many others, Kerry's fate was sealed in the moment he entered S-21. But he still managed to maintain an aura of humour. He wrote that his commanding officer was Colonel Sanders of KFC, and the phone number he gave the CIA was actually his home phone number. Van Nath was an artist, and at S-21 his talent saved his life. While thousands tortured and executed, he was ordered to paint portraits of Pol Pot, portraying the dictator as a godlike figure. Forced to create art for the very regime that had condemned him, he survived while others perished. After the fall of the Khmer Rouge, Van Nath used his paintings to reveal the horrors of S-21, haunting images of torture, fear and suffering. His work stands as a testimony to those who never escaped, ensuring the world never forgets. The prisoners of S-21 never left alive. After months of torture and forced confessions, they were taken blindfolded, hands tied, out of the prison, away from the decaying walls that had held them. Their final destination, the killing fields. There, beneath the open sky, they were lined up beside mass graves, where death was waiting. Bullets were too precious to waste, so the executions were brutal. Iron rods, machetes, sharpened bamboos. Some were forced to kneel before their graves, knowing what was coming, while others were thrown in, still breathing, buried beneath the layers of the dead and dying. By the time the Khmer Rouge fell, the fields were silent, but the earth told the truth. Decades later, when the graves were uncovered, bones lay tangled together, skulls shattered, rags of prisoners' clothing still clinging to the soil. Some of the pits held dozens, others hundreds. The killing fields became the resting place for nearly 20,000 victims from S-21 alone. Today, those fields are eerily quiet, the wind rustling through the trees, carrying echoes of the past. The bones remain, some collected into glass memorials, others still surfacing after heavy rains, grim reminders of a history too painful to forget.